Okay, more is usually the goal, but just remember at some point, diminishing returns will probably become a factor. More customers, more sales, more revenue, more is generally what we're looking for. But at some point, the law of diminishing returns is probably going to catch up with you. And that's a concept, of course, from economics, the idea that just continually increasing one element of production is not going to continue to give you an increased return. At some point, you hit a plateau and it becomes inefficient, and you ultimately go into negative incremental returns. And it struck me today when I was in a supermarket here in Malaysia that this supermarket had basically got to the point where more is potentially going to start giving them a diminishing return. The shopping aisles already are quite small. There's probably a space for sort of 1.5 people wide. So there's not quite enough space in the actual shopping aisles. Why? Because they wanted to have more shelves. The shelves are so long, they basically go right from one end of the store to the front of the store where the checkout counter is, and there's very little space between the checkout counter and the end of the aisle. Why? Because they want to put more products on. But what I saw today is there's just so many people there, there's nowhere for these people to stand while they're waiting to check out, and so everybody's lined up the aisles. And remember, these aisles aren't quite wide enough already. So now you've got one whole side of that aisle that's basically chock-a-block with people full of shopping trolleys. And so I can't actually get the products that I want to buy when I'm walking around the aisles shopping. Now, as a result of that, my shopping basket today was diminished by about 70%. I literally got the stuff that I needed and got out of there because it was just becoming too hard to try and find all the stuff that I needed. So diminishing returns in terms of my shopping had already kicked in. Now, there's always a trade-off, right? I mean, if they've got more customers and the basket size decreases slightly, they may be still ahead of the game. If you have an increase of 3 times the amount of customers and only a 50% reduction in the existing customers' baskets, then you're going to win. But if not, then maybe you're losing. And so there's always a trade-off when you add more. If you're adding more treatments to your menu, maybe that becomes too confusing for the customers and they don't know how to make a decision, so they just go for the basic option. Same if you're adding more fancy ingredients to your products. Gets too confusing, don't really understand it, why don't I just go for the basic product? With content, we hear a lot of talk about producing more content, which I'm a fan of, but the risk of that diminishing return is that maybe the quality becomes less. Of course, quality in this case is kind of subjective, and I would argue in this case the trade-off, what are you going to lose if the content isn't 100% because you're producing more? I think the trade-off is minimal. So I think the reality is that the message we have to learn is that in creating more, in producing more, in getting more, in offering more, sometimes at some point we're going to hit a plateau in terms of the return. And you've got to decide whether that trade-off is worth making or not. You know, in the supermarket case, having more customers and having less of a customer shopping experience is probably not a big deal because it's a supermarket. If that was a luxury good or a boutique store, having a lesser shopping experience is probably a big deal because people won't come back. You want them to stay longer and spend more. So there's always a trade-off with more. You just have to understand at some point you will kick into diminishing returns if you just continue to target more. You just need to be aware of the trade-off you're making, and is that a trade you're willing to make? Alrighty, that is it for today. I do thank you for your time, and I will be back again tomorrow. See ya.